The Clockwork Nightingale. The smell of old paper and dust motes suspended in the late afternoon sun was, for Elias Thorne, the true scent of permanence. He ran a practiced hand along the spine of a leather-bound volume, a forgotten edition of Baudelaire, tucked away on a high, shadowed shelf of the antiquarian's repose. Below him, the shop's proprietor, Mrs. Petroff, a woman whose eyes held the weary wisdom of too many witnessed sales, was negotiating the price of a stack of dime store mysteries with a teenager whose sole ambition seemed to be the cultivation of an impressive sneer. Elias wasn't looking for a book today. He was looking for a pattern, a small flaw in the intricate, predictable mechanism of his life. At 35, he was a restorer of antique automata, mechanical marvels of copper, brass, and velvet. His hands, though calloused from years of minute work, were steady, possessing the surgeon's calm, required to coax movement from frozen springs and gears. He lived alone in a quiet, well-ordered flat above his workshop, his evenings spent tracing schematics or listening to the faint, irregular tick of his latest repair. It was a life of meticulous, beautiful stillness. The flaw arrived not as a dramatic event, but as a small, polished wooden box tucked beneath a broken Victorian music stand. It was simple mahogany, no larger than a child's shoe, and utterly unmarked save for a tiny, barely visible silver plaque on the back that read, Elias. "Find something good, Mr. Thorne," Mrs. Petroff asked, her voice a low purr as the teenager finally departed, clutching his cheaply acquired pulp. "This box," Elias said, turning it over in his hands. It held the weight of something significant, yet its surface was blank, denying any clue to its contents. "Is it for sale? It looks like nothing." Mrs. Petroff adjusted her thick spectacles, peering at the object. "Ah, yes, that came in with the late Mrs. Abernathy's estate. Her solicitor was quite insistent it was worthless, just an empty keepsake box, he thought. But the inscription," she tapped the silver plaque, "Elias, remarkable coincidence. Elias bought the box for $40. $40 for an unreadable mystery, a small disruption." Back in his workshop, bathed in the cool light of his workbench lamp, he carefully examined his purchase. The wood was flawless, the grain tight. There was no visible hinge, no clasp. It was a perfect, seamless cube. He pressed, he tapped, he ran a powerful jeweler's loop over every millimeter. Nothing. He set it aside, promising himself he would return to it in the morning, and picked up his current commission. Dilapidated silver bird, a clockwork nightingale meant to chirp and flutter on the hour for a wealthy collector of musical curiosities. The bird was a nightmare of stripped screws and rusted pivots. As he worked, humming an off-key tune to himself, he thought about the box Elias, his name. He woke abruptly at 3:17 a.m. It wasn't a noise or a dream, but a distinct, heavy sensation of wrongness. He sat up in bed, listening. Silence. The comfortable, deep silence of a deserted street. He got up and walked into his workshop. The mahogany box sat on the bench, exactly where he had left it, but it was no longer seamless. A thin line, like a pencil mark, now bisected its top surface. Perched on the center of that line, balanced with impossible delicacy, was a tiny, intricately carved key made of dark, unpolished iron. Elias's pulse quickened, not with fear, but with the cold scientific thrill of a perfect enigma. He had seen thousands of locks and keys. He knew the precise geometry of mechanical security. This key, with its impossible sudden appearance and its ancient, handmade feel, defied physics and logic. He picked up the key. It was cool, heavier than it looked. He inserted it into the faint line on the box. It slid in perfectly, the line widening fractionally to admit the bit. A soft, precise click echoed in the silent room. He lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded crimson velvet, was a single, tightly folded piece of vellum. Elias unfolded the paper. It was not a letter. It was a drawing. A detailed, immaculate rendering of the Clockwork Nightingale currently dismantled on his workbench. But it wasn't just a drawing. It was a blueprint. Every spring, every lever, every gear was labeled with microscopic precision, rendered in ink so dark it looked like fresh blood. Beneath the drawing, in elegant copper-plate script, were 3 words: "It is incomplete." Elias stared, the vellum shaking slightly in his hand. The Nightingale was a known model, a creation of the Parisian master Philippe Lecoq, circa 1888. He had its schematics, he knew its mechanics. Yet this drawing depicted a subtle, key difference, an additional minuscule gear wheel, no bigger than a poppy seed, that he had never seen, and whose purpose was utterly obscure. He scrambled back to the workbench, his methodical calm fractured. He grabbed the bird's main chassis, examined the spot indicated on the blueprint. There, beneath the minute brass support, was a single empty pinhole, a tiny, almost imperceptible cavity that did not appear on any original schematic. The hole was perfect, clearly intentional. The next day passed in a focused, almost manic blur. Elias ignored his other commissions, ignored Mrs. Petrov's daily call. He scoured his reference library, looking for any mention of a Mark II Nightingale, a secret modification, a prototype. Nothing. The blueprint was an aberration. That evening, he reopened the box. The vellum was gone. In its place lay a different object, a small, dark object wrapped in a scrap of blue silk. He unwrapped it. It was the missing gear, the poppy seed gear. It was made of something that resembled blackened bronze, impossibly delicate, yet radiating a strange, muted strength. Elias felt a cold dread settle in his stomach, quickly followed by a surge of pure, dizzying curiosity. He was not a man of belief in the supernatural. The world was gears and levers. But this felt like a deliberate, hostile intrusion into his reality. He worked through the night. Fitting the new gear was the most delicate work of his career. It slid onto the pin with a barely audible snick, seating itself perfectly. It meshed with 2 adjacent wheels in a configuration that, mathematically, created a new, complex ratio. The standard action of the bird involved a single, short song, about 5 seconds long. This new ratio would alter the movement just before the song concluded. He wound the mainspring, his heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against his ribs. He waited for the strike of midnight. When the hour came, the Nightingale came alive. It fluttered its silver wings, turned its head, and began to sing its programmed familiar tune. 5 seconds passed. The tune should have ended, but the new gear engaged. The bird's song changed. It became a new melody, a complex soaring trill that Elias recognized instantly. It was the exact, haunting phrase of a concerto he had heard only once, many years ago, played by a street musician on the violin in a hidden courtyard in Venice. A musician whose face he could no longer recall, but whose music had stayed with him. The song lasted precisely 7 seconds. Then, silence. The Nightingale settled back into its motionless state, appearing once again to be nothing more than a beautiful, silent trinket. Elias sat back, breathing hard. Why? Why would a dead man, Lecoq, create such a convoluted secret mechanism only to have the blueprints and the critical component delivered, decades later, to him? He looked at the box, sitting innocently on his desk. He walked over and lifted it, intending to throw it across the room, demanding an explanation from the inert wood. He stopped. The silver plaque on the back, the one that read Elias, was gone. In its place, engraved deeply into the wood, was a single letter, L. The next day, Elias had his answer. He called Mrs. Petrov. Mrs. Petrov, the Abernathy estate. Do you recall who the solicitor was? Oh, a young man, Mr. Finch, I believe. Very dry. Elias knew the type. Did the estate contain any other musical items? Perhaps a violin? A violin? No, Mr. Thorne. Only books and the usual bric-a-brac. Why? Elias hung up slowly, his eyes tracing the line of the L on the wooden box. L. Lecoq, the clockwork master. But Lecoq died in 1895, and the violinist, memory was so old, so dusty. He realized his mistake. He had been looking at the automaton. He should have been looking at the delivery. The perfect logic of the system was staring him in the face. The box had not appeared randomly. It was an elaborate clockwork message. He returned to the antiquarian's repose. Mrs. Petrov was arranging a stack of biographies. Mrs. Petrov, Elias said, his voice measured. I apologize for the directness, but I need to know precisely who left that box with you. She sighed, wiping her hands on her apron. Mr. Thorne, it wasn't the solicitor. He merely had the large pieces catalogued. The small box was brought in by a private courier, a young woman. 2 days before the Abernathy collection arrived, she paid me a small fee to keep it on a low shelf until the estate was delivered. Said she'd lost the sales receipt and hoped the solicitor would take it back. The courier, Elias pressed. What did she look like? Oh, nothing remarkable. Quiet, wore a dark long coat, young, maybe 25. But she had the most peculiar eyes, very light blue, like chips of ice. Elias nodded, the pieces finally falling into place with a series of clean, sharp clicks. And the name she gave? Mrs. Petrov consulted a worn ledger. She tapped a line with her finger. Ah, here it is. Paid in cash. Name was Laura. Elias felt the unexpected twist in his gut, the jolt of recognition. Laura. His ex-fiancée. Laura, who had left him 7 years ago, claiming he was too predictable, that his life was a sequence of flawless, unyielding mechanism. Laura, a talented, volatile musician, a master violinist who had spent a summer busking in Venice before walking out of his life. She hadn't left a message, a note, or a tearful goodbye. She had left a puzzle. Elias walked back to his workshop, the realization settling over him with a profound, quiet weight. The mahogany box was not a historical artifact. It was a recent creation, built precisely for him. The key appearing magically at 3:17. It hadn't appeared. Laura, knowing his precise, sleep-light existence, had set a highly tuned timer, a perfect, silent clockwork release hidden within the box's false bottom, to eject the key in the deepest part of the night when he was most likely to be alone and awake. The vellum blueprint was a stunningly detailed forgery, her way of speaking his language, the language of precision. The inscription on the box, Elias, not a coincidence. It was a direct address. And the gear, the missing poppy seed gear. It wasn't a century-old component. It was the crucial part of her life, the extra, unpredictable component that had altered the predictable mechanism of his life. It changed the Nightingale's song from the routine 5 seconds of Lecoq's design to the 7-second phrase from the obscure Venetian concerto. Her song, The Nightingale, had only sung that new, unique melody once. After the 7th second, the blackened bronze gear had fractured, shearing off the pin. It was a deliberate, one-time mechanism. The message was not about a secret history of automata. It was a 7-second message sent across 7 years, a perfect, mechanical note of love and challenge. I was the part you were missing. Created an impossibility to prove it. Elias returned to his flat. He picked up his mobile, a device he rarely used for anything but time checks and composed to text. It was a simple, profound deviation from his usual script. The new song is beautiful. It was worth the wait. Elias, he didn't know her number, hadn't kept it. But then he remembered, she had never changed it. She was as consistent in her own way as his gears. He pressed send. The reply came back almost instantly. Always 7 seconds. The song is always yours. Elias Thorne, the methodical restorer of perfect mechanisms, sat down at his table. He had just discovered the most beautiful imperfection in his life. He looked at the shattered piece of blackened bronze, the one-time gear, and he knew the life he had so carefully wound and maintained was about to begin its own unpredictable 7-second song.